Hello and welcome to EcoElsa, where I, Elsa, bring you videos to help you take your kids outdoors, whether you're a parent or a teacher. On this week's video, we'll be going over the science behind fall leaves, why they change colors and fall off trees, as well as some fun activities for you to do with your kids. I also will be having a giveaway in this video. So at the end of this video, 2 of my wonderful subscribers will be winning access to some really cool prizes. So stay tuned to find out. For starters, a quick rundown of why fall leaves change color. Inside leaves, we all know that there are different pigments that cause them to have that color. One of them you may be more familiar with is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is what colors these leaves this nice bright green color. There also is another color called carotenoids, and carotenoids is a pigment that causes leaves to be yellows, oranges, and browns. Now over the summer, you will be able to see technically both pigments. It's just that the chlorophyll will cover up the nice bright yellow and orange and brown carotenoids. Now there is a third color that you may be more familiar with coming about in the fall that we don't usually see that often, the nice bright reds and purples. This is a really cool color with a little bit more special chemistry to it. Scientists aren't for sure why trees turn red, but they know this, that in the fall when the leaves are still producing the last bits of sugar as the chlorophyll is dying off, some of those sugars get stuck in the leaf and are not able to make it back into the trunk of the tree because of a cool night. This is why warm days and cool nights consecutively produces these nice bright red colors. This is because when it happens, the leaf begins to make a pigment called anthocyanin, and this is how we get these nice bright red colors. Like I said before, scientists aren't for sure why trees all of a sudden start turning red and making a new pigment in the fall. There are a few theories, but we're going to stick to what we know. Now the reason why the leaves drop off in the fall as well is because as the leaves are doing their last little bit of photosynthesis, creating more sugars for the tree to store for the winter to use in the spring to grow and survive, the leaves are also creating a cell wall between the leaf and the stem of the tree. And once this cell wall is finished, it separates the leaf fully from the branch. And usually for most species of trees, the leaf then falls off. Except for some trees like oaks, where the leaf will then stay on through winter and it needs to be mechanically knocked off that tree, whether it's through wind, rain, snow, sleet, or hail, or wind. The fall leaf activities that we'll be doing are both outdoor and indoor activities. That way there's a little something for everyone. I've also picked ones that are more affordable for teachers and parents so that you don't have to spend a ton of money on doing these. These are some really fun things to do with kids of a variety of ages, so take a look at the activities and pick what best fits what you're trying to meet as standards as well as the age group of your children. One of the first activities you can do with your students outdoors is nature journaling. How this works is you'll have your students either pick a tree or pick a leaf, and they will describe it, write up a little journal about it, maybe do a little bit of a creative story. For my fall nature journal, what students will be doing is finding a leaf on the ground and determining what species of leaf it is, and then trying to see if they can find what tree it came from. They will either then be gluing the leaf into the page or drawing it and telling a little bit about the leaf and maybe the story of how that leaf ended up on the ground and what color it is. This is to help the students start thinking about why leaves change colors and if there's a certain kind of science to it or their own theory behind it. Now, the next step after your students have done their nature journal about their leaf, they figured out what kind of tree it came from, is time to gather leaves for the rest of your activities. You'll be needing green leaves for the indoor science activity and beautiful, colorful leaves for the indoor nature art. The first step for getting ready for the indoor chromatography experiment is collecting green leaves. For this chromatography experiment, you'll be separating the pigments found present in green leaves. This is so you can show your students that chlorophyll is present as well as carotenoids so that they can see for themselves while exploring and doing science and helping further learn about leaf color. Do an extra favor and make sure that some of the green leaves you're harvesting are an invasive species called buckthorn or the invasive Eurasian honeysuckle. That way you're not damaging the natives while getting these bright green leaves. So what I'm going to be doing is picking these leaves for my chromatography experiment later on inside today, so that way I'm not damaging any of the native plants and instead am being a little bit mean to this invasive shrub that takes over habitats and kills off other species. Or another alternative is buying spinach or some other leafy green from the store that you can then do the experiment with. Now, the next step when outdoors will be gathering colorful leaves for you to be doing your indoor nature art with, or potentially outdoors if you want the students to sit outside and do it. Here are some tips for when gathering leaves with your students outdoors. For starters, keep in mind that poison ivy will be on the ground, and it is a nice bright red to orange color usually in the fall. So recommend that your students stay away from poison ivy leaves that are growing straight out of the ground. This will help keep them from getting an irritating rash that they can still get at this time of the year. Additionally, if you're worried about scarring the tree because of students ripping leaves off the tree, I recommend that you ask your students to gather leaves off the ground that have already fallen off a tree. Here's the key difference. You don't want leaves that are growing out of the ground if you're worried about your students accidentally picking up poison ivy. So leaves on the ground that are not attached. Hello and welcome back inside for the inside portion of the chromatography experiment. So you went out with your students, you collected leaves, now it's time to look at the pigments and to see if there actually is in fact another pigment besides green in some of your leaves. You also can do this experiment with some of the colored leaves so that you can show some of the other pigments as well. What you'll be needing for this experiment is however many different samples of leaves, a glass cup for each one, or a plastic cup, whatever you trust your students best with, isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol, and filter strips so that you can actually separate the ingredients, since chromatography is the separation of a mixture, and that's what we'll be doing in this. We'll be separating the different pigments into layers so you can see what pigments are present in the leaves. You'll also need a way of chopping up the leaves, whether it's with scissors or a knife, depending on how you trust your students, or if you do have it available, a mortar and pestle will work best. You really want to chop up the leaves into fine little pieces. Once the leaves are chopped up and in the glasses, you then will be filling it up with the rubbing alcohol to cover the leaves and letting it sit for 30 minutes. Something to note is isopropyl alcohol is not dangerous as long as you do not ingest it or get it in your eye. So now we just mix them up. While you're waiting for the leaf pigment to be dissolved into the isopropyl alcohol, you can also put the cups into a hot water bath to speed up the reaction. Once your alcohol leaf mixture has sat for 30 minutes, you then can strain out the little pieces of leaves to make it easier to see as you put the filter strip in and that reaction takes place. Otherwise, you can leave them in there. I chose to leave them in there because it makes it easier to compare which one was which leaf to begin with. You then will be taking the coffee filter strip and cutting a nice long piece like this. This is because the longer the piece, the better it works for separating the pigments on it. And try to not let it rest against the glass, otherwise it will make for a lot trickier experiment. It won't go as well. So once the 30 minutes are up, you'll place this filter strip in it and then you'll let it sit for about an hour. And while this is going on, the rubbing alcohol will be the mobile phase, carrying the pigments with it up the stationary phase, which is the filter strip. Depending on the polarity of the pigments, they will want to react with the filter paper in different ways. Some of them may want to really stick to the filter paper and so they won't travel very far up it, and others will really want to move up it. After you give it about an hour, you can take a look at your filter sheet and see what pigments were present in your leaves. The longer you let this reaction take place, the better results you'll get in colors as well as in separation between the different pigments. The 3 leaf species that I was comparing for this experiment was buckthorn, eastern cottonwood, and most likely sugar maple, although it could have also been black maple. Okay, welcome back. It's been about an hour. We're going to check and see how these filter strips turned out. Okay, here is the buckthorn one, here is the eastern cottonwood, and here is the sugar maple, most likely sugar maple, after an hour that already had changed leaves. So as you can see, we got a really nice dark green line from the chlorophyll for the buckthorn, and a little bit of a yellow line going on, not too much. Eastern cottonwood, we have a lot more of a yellow line going on, and smaller chlorophyll line. And just barely, you can just barely see it, is a yellow line, which is probably from the carotenoids in the sugar maple. It doesn't look like we have any red really showing up. So the anthocyanin doesn't look like worked. But that was a test for me. I've never done red leaves before. I usually only do this with green leaves. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to let this sit for a few more hours inside the mixture of the isopropyl alcohol and the leaves. And when we come back after a few more hours, we're going to see how it's changed even more. Okay, welcome back. Now we're going to take a look at the filter strips to see how the pigments turned out. So here we have the results on the filter paper from letting the chromatography experiment sit for several hours. It was a little bit longer than I was expecting. Sorry guys, I went to work, but we do have the results that we are kind of looking for. It's just they're a little bit harder to read than normal. So here we have the buckthorn, here we have the eastern cottonwood, and here we have what is most likely the sugar maple. So as you can see, there are a couple different lines on them and they've all started to blur together. So let's zoom in on a couple here. So here we have the buckthorn strip. As you can see, the isopropyl alcohol mixture of the leaves was moving up this way. Now it looks like we have a lighter green line and a darker green line. Now usually how this works is the chlorophyll tends to try to stick to the filter sheet more. So usually ends up being the lower line, and then the higher line usually ends up being the carotenoids because they move up it farther and faster. But I am not, 100% sure on this. It does look like there was two pigments in the buckthorn, a lighter colored yellow and a darker colored green. So same thing for the eastern cottonwood. The isopropyl alcohol mixture was moving up. This kind of ended up with many, many lines, but they kind of started to separate, it looks like. So you had a darker green again and a lighter yellow. So once again, we're looking at most likely two pigments. And then lastly, this is where it gets a little interesting. So I have never done like a sugar maple before, or I shouldn't say sugar maple. I've never done leaves that have already changed colors for the season, but what we're looking at is most likely two different colors, and since there is a reddish color and a yellow color, most likely the chlorophylls completely died off, and what we're left with is the anthocyanin, which is the darker red color, and the carotenoids, which is probably the lighter yellow color. So as you guys can see, overall a really easy experiment that you can do with your kids at home. And now that we've done some science experiments and some language arts, some writing and journaling, it's time for nature art. So welcome to the leaf art portion. A couple things to keep in mind with this is it doesn't need to just be about art. You also can go into the science of pigments if that is something you're looking to cover with your students. As well as you can also add in some language arts. So you can make up a story about, say, your leaf monster, or your leaf animal. Otherwise, if you're going to be making leaf masks, you can also have your students come up with a play about leaves if they'd like. There's a lot of opportunities here for cross-curricular learning, which is really awesome. So I hope you take advantage of that if that's something you're looking to do. What I like about doing leaf art is it is affordable for teachers and for students. All you need is glue, scissors, leaves, and paper. That is it. That's all you need, and you're able to make some pretty cool creations with this. You can make leaf animals, leaf monsters, leaf masks, or if you have some paint available, you can do some more mixed media things. Okay, now time to talk about your beautiful colorful leaves that you gathered while outside. First, what you will be doing is taking your beautiful bright leaves that you spent the day gathering with your students, and you will be pressing them between two sheets of paper. This is to keep them from damaging your book while you dry them inside a thick and heavy textbook of some sort in your classroom. The important part is to make sure you have the white sheets of paper in between the leaves and the pages of the book. That way your book does not get damaged. Some pointers when pressing your leaves to use for nature art is making sure they're not dirty or wet. So give them a chance to dry out, and if they are a little dirty, try and wipe them off the best that you can. This will help from preventing damage to your books, as we don't want mold growing in your books and we don't want your books getting dirty. Also why you have the protective white sheets of paper on either sides of the leaves. Here's some leaves from a previous day that I did. Let's see how they turned out. Yep. So see, you just give them a few days to finish drying and pressing, and you end up with these perfect little leaves to be able to do different art experiments with. If you're not going to use the paper for more leaf art, what I like about it is that you can then reuse it to make your art pieces on with the students. They really do turn out really good. Ta-da! See? Project Wild book. Good for a lot of different things. Check out a previous video to see what else this book is good for. There's two ways to do leaf art when it comes to kids. One, you can have the students ahead of time pick kind of a monster they want to make or an animal they want to make ahead of time, and then go out and collect the leaves and do them through the pressing process that I showed you. Or you can go out as a whole group, collect just tons and tons of leaves and press them, and then when you get back to the classroom you have a big communal pile of leaves that have been pressed and dried and they're ready to go. And then the students can then from there pick what animals they'd like to make. In this case, it's better to have more than enough leaves to do it. That way students aren't fighting over very specific leaves. Some big leaf favorites are always going to be bright red ones and yellow ones. Students love using these leaves, so keep that in mind that you might want a lot more of those than the brown ones. Because the leaves have been drying, the color maybe seem a little bit dull in comparison to when you put the leaf in the book because the pigments have faded in the leaves. It's okay, they'll still be a nice color and you can still use them for art. And because they're dry, they also will glue better for your different art projects to do with your students. Like these. Here I will show you how I make a leaf animal. I take different leaves and piece them together until it kind of looks like the animal I'm going for. A lot of times for children it'll be a lot easier if they pick an animal, they have the photograph to look at while they make it. So if they want to make a tiger, you have a picture of a tiger for them, and they can look at that to see maybe what colors they want to use and what shapes of leaves. And here is the finished product of my leaf animal. Do you like my chicken? See? It's very simple to make. I only used I think 2 different types of leaves to make it. So that shows you can do a little bit of snipping and stuff. And the only paint that I used on this one was some black paint for the eye and the nostril because I didn't want to try and cut up a leaf that small. One of the art projects you can do with your students is monster art, where you have your students use their leaves to create a monster creature or monster face. And here is the finished product of my leaf monster. Scary, right? Super scary. Scary leaf monster. Scary leaf monster. Okay. So for this one, as you can see, I used a lot more varieties of leaves, and that added to a lot of the texture for the art piece. That's something you can talk about with your students about using different materials. And then I also added more paint this time, more black and white. I could have even painted it up even more, maybe added stripes and stuff. So this is something you could talk about with mixed media arts as part of your art class. Otherwise, another way of getting cross-curricular learning in here, which is one of my favorites, is after the students have created their leaf monster, they need to write a spooky story about their leaf monster. So Just a fun idea. I hope you guys enjoyed the art piece of this. And now, the moment you all have been waiting for, the giveaway! Congratulations to these 2 winners! You have won access to my super secret video that has a secret activity for you to take your kids outdoors and do, as well as free access to my curriculum I've been working on to go along with this EcoElsa video. If you're interested in getting access to this video or this curriculum as well to use with your kids for free to help them get outdoors, then go ahead in the description below. There is a link to joining my email list. Go ahead and put your email in there and you'll be receiving an email from me with a link to my video as well as my curriculum for free. All you have to do is put in your email. If you're still looking for more resources, check me out on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest with tons of resources to help you take your kids outdoors as well as a blog. As always, I hope you all have a fantastic week. I post new videos on Wednesdays, and I'll see you all next week. Be safe, learn lots, have fun, and get your kids outdoors. Bye!